Eglin Air Force Base covers 724 square miles of Florida Panhandle, more ground than some entire counties. Every single day, it feeds a workforce that tops 20,000 people. No frozen truckload rolls through the gate to make that happen. Everything's made from scratch, not shipped in pre-cooked. But scratch cooking at this size runs on logistics, not boasting. A problem the size of a small city, and it starts hours before the first fighter jet ever leaves the runway. You get there before the sun does. 6 in the morning, and the parking lot outside the Breeze dining facility is already half full. Trucks and sedans nosed in at odd angles because whoever pulled the early shift didn't have time to line up straight. Inside, the lights are already on, and so is the grill. Eggs hiss on flat-top steel. Someone's cracking a case of them by hand, 30 at a time, because the line opens at 6:30 and the first plate has to be ready the second the doors do. The smell hits you before the sound does. Browning butter, coffee that's been on since 4, bacon rendering down into a pan somebody will strain and reuse for the vegetables at lunch. Nothing here came shrink-wrapped that morning. It came in raw. No shortcuts. Not yet, anyway. Go further back, past the serving line, and the kitchen looks less like a restaurant and more like a small factory that happens to smell like breakfast. There's a walk-in cooler the size of a garage, cases of eggs stacked to the ceiling, produce boxes still damp from the truck that dropped them an hour ago. There's a prep table where someone's already broken down a case of chicken thighs by hand. Knife work fast enough that you'd miss it if you blinked, because that same chicken has to be seasoned, cooked, and on the line before the lunch rush hits at 10:30. Nobody's moving like they have time to spare. Nobody's panicking either, just working. It's the pace of people who've done this exact math every single day for years and know exactly how many minutes each step actually takes. The Breeze is Eglin's flagship, run under a program the Air Force calls FLY, which stands for Food, Life, You. And it looks less like a mess hall and more like a food court, built for people who don't have time to sit in traffic to eat well. There's Enrich Grill, doing made-to-order plates, a burger or a bowl built while you watch. There's a deli counter, sub-connection, slicing meat fresh for sandwiches instead of pulling pre-made ones out of a cooler. There's a pizza rotation called Slice of Life that changes daily. A full soup and salad bar and a line of grab-and-go coolers, simply to go, stocked for anyone who can't spare the 20 minutes a real sit-down meal takes. It serves breakfast, lunch, and dinner 7 days a week, 365 days a year, because jets don't stop testing on holidays, and neither does anyone who keeps them in the air. Here's the part that surprises people who've only seen chow hall stereotypes on television. This isn't a tray of something beige scooped from a steam table by someone counting down the minutes to their break. The base has actually been recognized in Air Force-wide competition for its dining program, one of the honors the service hands out specifically for kitchens that do this job well. That recognition doesn't come from reheating, not a chance. It comes from butchering, from baking, from someone standing over a stock pot before dawn because a good broth takes hours and there is no shortcut that tastes the same. The stereotype says military food is whatever's left after the good stuff got shipped overseas. The reality, at least here, is a kitchen that treats 20,000 mouths like 20,000 individual orders, one plate at a time, on a schedule that never actually slows down. Watch the line at 7:15, right in the middle of the rush, and you'll see why the scratch standard is such a strange thing to maintain. Every cook has maybe 4 seconds to plate before the next tray hits the rail. A dishwasher, the size of a small car, runs constantly in the back, steam pouring off it, because the plates and pans never stop coming. Someone's restocking the salad bar mid-shift, refilling cut tomatoes that were whole an hour ago. None of it looks like a factory line exactly, but it moves like one. Right up until you notice the guy at the end of the counter hand-searing a piece of chicken because the fryer's backed up. Right over fast. Every time. But volume is exactly where this gets hard. 20,000 isn't an abstract number when you're the one buying the chicken. Multiply one plate by 3 meals by 7 days and you're not running a restaurant anymore, you're running a supply chain. And every single ingredient in it has to survive a Florida summer, a limited loading dock, and a kitchen staff that's smaller than the crowd they're feeding. A missed produce delivery on a normal Tuesday means an annoyed customer somewhere. A missed produce delivery here means a hole in the menu for thousands of people who already planned their entire day around what time the line opens. And there's no corner grocery store to run to when the walk-in cooler comes up short 2 hours before the doors do. No backup plan, just a phone call and a prayer. Weekends complicate the math even further. A normal restaurant sees its slowest hours on a Saturday morning. Here, the crowd barely changes because test schedules and flight operations don't pause for the calendar, and a maintenance crew troubleshooting an aircraft on a Sunday still needs the same 3 meals as everyone else. The kitchen staff's weekends almost the same as weekdays, just with a smaller crew stretched across the same hours, which means the margin for error on a Saturday morning is thinner than it is on a Tuesday, not wider. The budget side of that math is almost as strange as the cooking side. Team Eglin, the whole community of military, civilian and contract personnel supporting the base, carries an annual payroll estimated around $2 billion. And feeding that many people every single day is its own line item inside a much bigger machine. Every case of chicken, every flat of eggs, every sack of flour for the bread that gets baked on site has to be bought, tracked, stored and used before it turns at a scale most restaurant owners would find flat out terrifying. By 9 at night, the room looks completely different. The lunch crowd is long gone, the lights are dimmer, and dinner service runs slower, quieter. The kind of pace where you can actually hear the fryer basket drain instead of shouting over it. Families show up here too, not just single airmen grabbing a plate between shifts. Because meal cards work across every FSS location, and a tired parent at the end of a long day isn't cooking dinner from scratch at home either. The bakery in back is usually just finishing its first overnight batch by then. Loaves cooling on wire racks for tomorrow's sandwich line. Because bread made fresh on site has to start hours before anyone's hungry for it. Nobody watching the dinner rush would guess it. 12 hours earlier, this same room was a dead sprint. Coffee alone is its own small operation. A base that runs shift work around the clock burns through it by the urn, not the cup. And the pot that's brewing at 4 in the morning for the breakfast crew is often still going, refilled and refilled, well past the hour anyone on a normal schedule would call it a night. Multiply one urn by every dining location on base, and you've got a beverage line that never actually empties, because somewhere on 724 square miles, somebody just came off shift and needs it more than sleep. And the people eating aren't on one schedule. That's the next problem, and it's the one that actually breaks a normal kitchen. Eglin trains F-35 pilots through the 33rd Fighter Wing, tests weapons and guidance systems through the 96th Test Wing, and hosts the Army's 7th Special Forces Group. 3 completely different populations running on 3 completely different clocks. A maintainer pulling an overnight shift on the flight line doesn't want breakfast at 6:30. He wants it at 2 in the morning, standing up with grease still on his hands from the last inspection panel. That's what the lift exists for. A grab-and-go satellite kitchen built for exactly the person who can't make it to a sit-down line. Stocked with meals that were still cooked from real ingredients, just packaged to survive being eaten one-handed in a cockpit or a hangar bay. Pilots themselves run on the strangest clock of anyone on base. A training sortie doesn't care what time your body thinks it is. Report times shift by the week, sometimes by the day, chasing weather windows and range availability, and a kitchen that can only serve on a fixed schedule would leave half the flight line hungry before a mission. The food follows the flying, not the other way around. Sandwiches and hot boxes staged near the squadron buildings for whoever's about to strap into a cockpit and won't see a dining hall again for 6 hours. So the kitchen doesn't get to close. Ever. Between the scheduled meal windows, the counters don't go dark. They switch over to a rotating stock of ready-made items and an extensive salad bar, so anyone walking in at the wrong hour still has something that isn't a vending machine candy bar. Multiply that across every hour of every day, and you start to understand why this operation needs more staff on a given morning than most restaurants employ in a year. A restaurant closes at 10. Everyone goes home. This kitchen just changes shape. Student pilots add a wrinkle nobody plans for on a normal restaurant floor. The 33rd Fighter Wing trains F-35 pilots for the Air Force, the Marine Corps and the Navy at once, which means a single squadron building can have 3 different services worth of students cycling through sorties on 3 different training tempos, and every one of them eventually shows up hungry at whatever hour their flight actually landed. A student who briefs at 4 in the morning and doesn't debrief until noon has effectively skipped breakfast by any normal clock. The dining program treats that gap as routine instead of an exception, because on this base it is one. Sourcing the actual ingredients is its own quiet fight nobody sees on the serving line. Florida's growing season doesn't line up neatly with a menu planned months in advance, so produce orders shift week to week, chasing whatever's actually available instead of whatever looked good on paper. A head cook here has to think less like a chef with a fixed menu and more like someone running triage on a delivery truck, deciding in real time whether today's tomatoes go into the salad bar or get held back for tonight's sauce. None of it shows up on the plate, not directly. It just shows up as the difference between food that tastes like it was planned and food that tastes like someone actually paid attention. Now stretch that same problem across the land itself, because Eglin isn't one building, it's the largest Air Force base in the country by land area, big enough that a single loading dock could never cover it. There's Legend's Sports Grill for anyone who wants a sit-down dinner after a long shift, wings and burgers, and a wall of televisions running whatever game happens to be on. There's a snack bar out at the golf course, serving sandwiches to a completely different crowd, people on their day off instead of their shift. There's a food court at the Exchange for anyone who just needs something fast between errands, sandwiched between a shopette and a gas station on a strip that could pass for any suburban shopping centre if you ignored the flight line half a mile away. Every one of those locations is drawing from the same supply chain, the same trucks, the same window of hours before Florida heat turns fresh produce into a liability. A kitchen manager here isn't just cooking. He's solving a puzzle where the pieces are perishable and the clock never stops. And he's solving it in 5 buildings at once. Here's where the ladder climbs past comfort and into something closer to the edge. Feeding people is not actually Eglin's mission. The 96th Test Wing runs the real one, testing the weapons and guidance systems that end up on every Air Force jet in the fleet. And some of that testing happens in conditions engineered to be as brutal as anywhere on Earth. The base is home to a climate lab capable of simulating extreme heat and extreme cold on demand. Built to see whether hardware survives environments almost nobody ever stands in. The kitchens supporting the crews around that kind of testing don't get the luxury of a fixed schedule or a fixed location. When operations move out to the range, so does the food. And from scratch stops meaning a butcher's counter in an air-conditioned building. It means someone figured out how to keep a scratch standard alive somewhere with none of the infrastructure that makes it easy. Coolers on a truck bed instead of a walk-in, a folding table instead of stainless steel. The Army unit stationed here adds its own version of the same problem. Special operations training doesn't run on a dining hall clock at all. It runs on a training clock, which means the people supporting it eat whenever there's a gap, not whenever the doors happen to be open. A base built around one schedule would fail these units completely. So the base doesn't run on one schedule, it runs on all of them, every hour a potential meal window. A Ranger candidate finishing the final phase of training here isn't walking into the breeze for a sit-down plate anyway. His food is staged, planned, and often eaten standing up somewhere on the range, sometimes hours after the kitchen actually cooked it. That means the same scratch standard that drives the breakfast line has to survive a delay it was never designed for, held at temperature, packed to travel, and still edible by the time the person it was cooked for actually gets a break long enough to eat it. Getting that balance wrong doesn't just mean a worse meal. On a training cycle already pushing people past exhaustion, a meal that goes untouched because it's unappetizing is calories a body needed and didn't get. That's not new either. Eglin's kitchens have been solving this exact problem since before it was called Eglin. During the Second World War, the crews who trained here for the Doolittle Raid, the mission that sent B-25 bombers off a carrier deck toward Tokyo, ate whatever the base could put in front of them while they rehearsed a takeoff nobody had attempted before, on a runway reportedly marked off to mimic the length of a carrier deck. There was no fly program then, no made-to-order grill station, nothing resembling the operation running today. But the underlying math was already the same. Feed the crew rehearsing something dangerous, feed them well enough that hunger isn't one more thing working against them, and do it on whatever schedule the mission actually demands, instead of the one that's convenient. 80+ years later, the aircraft changed completely, the mission changed completely, and a scratch kitchen that once fed bomber crews rehearsing an impossible takeoff now feeds fighter pilots training on a jet nobody had imagined back then. The problem the dining hall solves never did. Feed the people who fly first, worry about everything else second. So here's the strangest part, the thing that actually answers the question in the title. And it took a walk through the whole operation, from the 6 a.m. grill line to a folding table out on the range, to actually see it clearly. It isn't a secret ingredient or some hidden bunker of gourmet chefs. It's that nothing on that line was ever designed to be easy. A frozen tray shipped in bulk would be cheaper, faster, and nobody outside the kitchen would ever know the difference on a Tuesday morning at 6:45. The scratch standard survives anyway, meal after meal, because the people running that kitchen decided a maintainer coming off a night shift and a fighter pilot walking in before a training sortie both deserve a plate that somebody actually cooked, not one that somebody just microwaved. 20,000 people a day, 3 meals a day, on a base the size of a small country, and the choice gets made fresh every single morning, before most of them are even awake. Was it worth it, building an entire kitchen around the harder way of doing things, when nobody would have complained about the easier one? Every shortcut was there the whole time. Nobody outside that kitchen would have known if the eggs came pre-cracked or the bread came pre-sliced. Ask the airman who pulled the 2 a.m. shift and got a real meal out of the lift instead of a vending machine. Ask the cook who's been cracking eggs by hand since before sunrise in a kitchen that never technically closes. The people eating never see the decision get made. They just eat, get back to work, and never think twice about where it came from. Which might be exactly the point. If you want to see what the rest of a base this size actually runs on, from the runway to the range, there's another one of these breaking down exactly that, right after this.